Hi everyone in HPA 400. This is Sherry Weingart, and we are now between week 4 and week 5. And so for the closeout of week 4, I thought we'd review a few of the most pertinent aspects of the discussions that we've been having. First, I just want to say, isn't it great when Professor Schwartzman puts at the bottom of each of our threads, each of our forums, a considered essay that he has written to which you can refer after you've spent all this time slogging over your own answer, and which we really mean to take the conversation to another place. In other words, to refine it, to people to say, oh yeah, or I still don't think that's right. So please look for such essays from either Professor Schwartzman or myself or Professor Ziegler as we go. And we'll try and post them on each other's forums, so we'll just try and get that covered. So some of the discussion this week was really good, especially when you were trying to distinguish what is a public health organization, who's in, who's out. You know, who's in and who's out is a big question for whatever field, whatever endeavor we are involved with. We have to figure out who's in the club and who maybe could have membership in the club if they did certain things, and who we'd never accept as a club member. And so in your application of certain decision rules to the suggestions or the roster that we put before you, some of you had very significant and firm stands on these issues, and for some of the organizations you wavered a little bit, and that was good discussion. One thing I want to make clear is you never have to agree with us in order to be assured of a good grade, or we have no party line here. We ask that you consider what we say, but really you need to develop this, your understanding of this course as it best fits you, as it befits you. So a few of the themes I just want to remark on very quickly. Number one, what is a governmental public health organization? There's a certain kind of public health, governmental public health function, sometimes expressed as, you'll see these initials, local governmental presence for public health, LGPF, and these are the public sector agencies who are the last resort protectors of public health. So that in the 10 essential services that many of you mentioned, the health department is responsible on whatever level for all of them. Nonprofit organizations that are PHOs may be responsible or see themselves take on the responsibility of a few of those and do them really well, and that's terrific, and they're in the club. But public health is, on the governmental level is assigned the duty, and the citizenry or residents have the reasonable expectation that those essential services will be done by the government, the public sector. Even if they contract a lot of the specifics out, the buck stops in the public sector. There are many PHOs that aren't public sector, of course, and this even goes internationally. Nobody would argue that UNICEF is not a PHO. I think I had 2 negatives in there, but UNICEF is a PHO, no matter which way you slice it. Some folks thought that, you said the Boston Symphony Orchestra can't be a public health organization, even though I know that music is good for our soul, and our soul is part of our health. I want to remind everybody, or if you're not familiar with the emergency planning kind of activities, that someplace that solicits memberships and pledges for its support could be commandeered in a time of emergency. That phone bank capacity could be commandeered by an emergency, an incident commander, to be a public health asset in an emergency. So nothing is hard and fast. And I think that was maybe hard for some of us to understand about the Massport thing, about transportation, because we have only to remember September 11th and how when the New York. Well, if you're providing care for the community, but you're doing it in a serial way, one by one by one by one, and you are not held accountable on the level of population, meaning that's the denominator, you're only held accountable for the population of people who are enrolled in your service or who come walk through your door, that's not exactly a public health organization. So these are distinctions with differences, we think. I also want to harken back to something in week 3, when the last question we reviewed mission statements. And I think last time I made a reference about the relative opacity rather than transparency of some of the mission statements. When you look at the mission statement that's offered, for example, on the web of any group that you're trying to understand if they are or are not likely to be a good partner for you as a PHO, it's sometimes very hard to actually determine this, because organizations have, as they've gotten perhaps more sophisticated, but I think more stingy, with their sense of what they will and will not put on the web, they can put a whole lot of stuff on there that is really just a shade over from what you would need for true transparency and for a final determination of whether they would be a public health partner for you. So long documents that were done by a third party they have, but they won't tell you the minutes of the last meeting that they have, that kind of thing. All of which brings us to week 5, where we take up, how do you determine what are the strategic issues facing your organization?